Hello and welcome. I am Catherine Stoker, the founder of the Independent Education Consultants, and today I'd like to welcome you to my conversation with Philippa Dobree Carey. Hello, Philippa.
Hi, Catherine.
Today we're going to have a bit of a conversation about Philippa's experiences as a mum living and working in Switzerland and bringing up her children within the Swiss and international school education system, and the experiences that Philippa gained regarding planning their future education onto university, which she has shared in a book and some online resources called From High School to Uni. So more about that later. But first of all, Philippa, could you just sort of tell us a bit about yourself?
So, hi. Well, I'm originally from Bournemouth in the UK. I came out here just over 30 years ago for a temporary contract and ended up staying. I've have my two children born and raised here. And I work in an international organization during the day, a humanitarian organization. And having put my two children through university in the last few years, I noted every step of the way so that I would get it right for the next time and improve each term. I was moving them in and out, and in 3 different countries, in the UK, in Switzerland, and in Paris, France. So I thought I would help other parents by giving them all the information they need in one book on one website, rather than spending hours trawling for information on the website. And that's my passion project.
Fantastic. And Philippa, your children, have they been through education in the Swiss system or international school system, or what? How did you choose to educate them?
So both. So they started primary school in the Swiss system, in the local school. So they went to a creche to begin with, and then went to a little primary school, which was fantastic. But in contrast to the English system, they don't start reading or writing until 6. So while you put them in school at the age of 4.5, they do colouring and beautiful projects. But as an English mum, it was very frustrating that they weren't actually learning to read or write. But they very quickly picked that up at 6. And I must say, my children have beautiful handwriting and speak perfect French, because they are drilled on a daily basis when they do finally start. So that was the Swiss system. And then later on, I transferred them into the international school, because I wanted them educated in English as a mother tongue rather than English as a foreign language. They used to speak to me in French.
It's a common dilemma, isn't it, for British expat families who are living abroad? You have all these amazing benefits of your children growing up, understanding that there's a big wide world out there and being fluent in other languages. But also you have this dilemma of how and when do I, transfer them into the British system.
Yeah, and it's a huge decision. I mean, it's quite stressful, to be honest, because it really depends on the child and how well they're doing. For example, my eldest is a girl. She did very well in the Swiss system. It's very linear. It's very they learn by repetition, they learn the topics, they're given the specific subjects to learn. Whereas the international school is very much sort of coursework and project management and working together as a team, and working towards a goal, but they're encouraged to think creatively. And that suited my son better. The Swiss system as well, at the age of around 10, they catalogue them. So they have 3 bands, lower, middle, and high. The high band are bound for university. The middle band will go to an apprenticeship or technical college, and the lower bands manage. And it's quite tough, because my first child was put in the middle band. She spoke fluent French, but they said, "You're a foreigner, she's struggling with certain languages." And I thought, well, I'm not going to prohibit her by not allowing her to go to university. So I took that decision to take her out and put her in an international school.
there's similar problems the world over, aren't they? You know, where because with it in a more IB focused world, I suppose now, where there is a lot of focus on skills and life skills and presentation and communication and engagement, versus a British system, which particularly when you're younger is still quite focused on skills and the grounding of the skills. Those questions, those worries as a parent as to which system is right and when and how, seem to happen wherever you live. So let's just move on. So your children are now, where are they now? What stage have you got to now with your children's education?
My daughter is wrapping up a master's in Paris, and she's doing an internship right now as part of her master's. She went to the University of Bath to do a bachelor's in modern languages and European studies, which was fantastic. Absolutely loved it. First time away, staying away from home, but back to the UK, which was quite bizarre because she chose that herself. And my son is in the Hospitality Business Management School in Switzerland, and he's in his 3rd year, currently doing an internship as well. That's part of the program.
So you're sort of almost an empty nester, aren't you? Which I suppose is where the passion project came from, for you to share your knowledge and your experiences as a mum of bringing your children through from school and preparing them to university, and then seeing one, you know, travel across to the UK for uni at Bath, and then one stay in Switzerland. So what are the sort of key areas that you think parents should focus on when they're, you know, they're in a position? A lot of parents are in a position now with A-level results having come out and excited youngsters off to uni, and what are the key areas that you recommend they focus on to get them ready for that next step?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, going back to choosing the right school for your child, I think you've really got to look at what your child needs in terms of, like I said, with my daughter liked repetition. She liked the strict sort of guidelines with the Swiss school. My son is more creative, he's more project focused, and they've really thrived once I moved them or put them into the right environment. So that's already one big decision. It's not about what school you want them to go to, it's about what's good for them. The second thing I think is the difference between A-levels, certainly GCSEs, but A-levels and IB, which I've seen through my eldest child, or both of them, in fact, with coping at university. IB teaches kids how to write essays, self-discipline, deadlines, assignments, and get themselves organized. And the A-level children were much better technically. They went much more into depth into the languages, I guess, because they've got less subjects at that higher level. But on the self-organization side, maybe not so much. So there's very different aspects, and I think those two as well would make you look into the decision you need to make as to which path your child needs to take.
Yes. And I mean, bearing in mind, you know, for a lot of mums, this might be the first time that their child is away from home when they go to university, and that's, you know, that's a very tricky thing. I mean, some children obviously may have been to boarding school, so you've sort of made part of a step in that direction. But for you as a mum, what did you find most difficult in terms of seeing them travel off to university and hence not seeing them every day?
It was tough. It was really tough. I mean, I work full time, but I'm very hands-on. And I think when I installed my daughter into Bath University, I cried all the way home. My husband was mortified on the plane because he thought people would think we're having an issue. But oh gosh, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Having said that, she absolutely loved it. And the difference we saw in her when she came home just at half term or Christmas, the independence she got, the self-confidence she got was amazing. And I loved it. I loved seeing that new side of her. And, you know, luckily I still had one at home. So, I mean, I still had plenty of washing to do. But it was amazing to see the difference that they and the independence and confidence that they learn once they're away.
So, in terms of the children who, youngsters who have that independence for the first time, I imagine as a parent, a key thing that you might be worried about is safety. I mean, how do you prepare your youngster for being away from home for the first time, so that you can be reassured that they're going to make safe decisions, and that, you know, they will be safe with this new independence at university?
I mean, it's quite funny. I have a funny anecdote about that, because so we brought up, my children brought up in Switzerland, which is a very safe, healthy, you know, country, beautiful country. And we started giving her the talks about being safe and, you know, going out at night and etc. And my daughter said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm street smart. I know what I'm talking about." And my husband laughed, because he said, "No kid from an international school in Geneva is going to be street smart. You need to learn what to do." And it's little things like, don't walk in the street at night with your both AirPods in. At least have one out, so you know you're aware of things going around you. When you go out at night, have somebody who's not drinking, so they're the ones who keep the group together. You know, use Find My Phone, Life 360 app, that sort of thing, to make sure you know where your group is or your child is. So there's lots of little things. I put these things in my book as well. My son actually also wrote a blog on our website on safety and how to keep safe when you go out at night. It is a worry for parents, but you have to trust to a certain extent, but definitely have a talk before you leave.
And I think encouraging your youngster to have an open dialogue with you, you know, that's the real assurance. Because I know, you know, I've heard from some parents where, you know, youngsters disappear off to uni, and, you know, parents don't hear from them, and other than looking at Find My Phone, and, you know, where are they? I mean, in your book, what do you suggest to parents about staying connected and communicating?
So I actually put in the book a message to both, because I've said to the students, think about your parents too. They're letting you go. It's very hard for them too. So do check in. You know, you can either arrange if you're not very good at staying in touch, then arrange at least a once a week sort of scheduled call. And you both know that at that time, you're both going to be at home. You'll both have a call. My daughter called in pretty much every night around dinner time. So we would have the iPad FaceTiming her while we were having dinner, and it was like we were sitting at the table together, which was lovely. But I have other colleagues who say, "Oh, I'm lucky if I get a text every 2 weeks." You know, it's a dialogue, and it depends on your relationship, but it's a two-way thing. I did download, or we've always used the Life 360 app, because then it's sort of passive stalking. So you know where they are without texting them, without harassing your child. So it's comforting.
I think they're having a regular meetup is great, isn't it? Because I know my brother with his two daughters, they used to have Sunday lunch together quite often via a video call on the iPad or whatever it was. And, you know, they'd all agree to have cooked their own Sunday lunch wherever they were. And, you know, they were at two different universities. And actually they had some lovely Sunday lunches together, you know, just as a regular get together.
Yeah, no,
and also they got to meet some of their friends too, who said, "Oh, this is a good idea. Let's all sit around the table and join in together." And I think having a regular opportunity. So when you know, talking about food and that sort of thing, do you cover cooking and feeding yourself?
I do. I actually did quite a big section on food, mainly sort of all the different things. There's plenty of websites out there for students and cookbooks. So I've given some ideas of sort of batch cooking ideas. So you can make a huge lasagna and chop it up into different portions and store those in the freezer. But there's plenty of apps and books out there. So I don't touch on how to cook, but I talk about how to food shop, when to food shop, when you go in a shop, what to look for, how to store your food, how when you first arrive at university, go and bag your shelf and in the fridge and the freezer, so that you've got your things. So it's little tips like this that are helpful, that a parent might not necessarily think about. But it's also the social aspect of cooking. You're sharing a kitchen with 5-6 other people. You know, it's about finding the right time to cook for you, allergies, like we said earlier, about being respectful to others who may have allergies, connected to, you know, their religion. Don't be cooking bacon if, you know, you're sharing a flat with, you know, Muslims. It's all about that sort of awareness that a parent might not necessarily teach their child before they go off to university.
Yes, and I think, you know, from young people I've spoken to at uni, you know, one of the biggest challenges for them is budgeting, isn't it? Because things like meat are expensive, so it's understanding, you know, how maybe you won't have meat quite as often as you ate meat at home with your parents. And I mean, budgeting and food are quite well connected, aren't they? And obviously a big part of university is learning how to manage your own money. Do you cover that in your book?
I do extensively. I've also created an interactive budget calculator on our website, because it's the first question that everybody asks, including myself. How much money do you give them? How do you create a budget? How do you teach them how to monitor their own budget? You know, do you just keep handing out when they've blown through their budget for the month? Do you just keep giving them handouts, or do you just say, no, you know, you need to start learning? So it's a tough thing for parents too. But yes, I absolutely talk through, here's how you calculate the budget, here's how you split bills with your housemates, here's what to look for when you're even buying things like a toaster, or, you know, do you split the cost, or do you decide one person's going to use it and take it home at the end of the year? So yes, there's quite an extensive chapter on budget, but also for international kids, how to open a bank account, what to look for, what banks offer you, how to negotiate with the bank, what sort of cards do you need? Do you need a debit card, a credit card? You know, be careful about getting into debt, because then you need to look into credit score. So there's quite an extensive chapter on all those aspects.
And with a daughter that went to Bath University, and you're obviously an expat parent, one of the things that we're quite often asked is about expat and home fees and university, and whether you pay home fees or international fees. I mean, obviously it's not a one size fits all, and it is very much dependent on each family situation. Yeah. But what was your experience with the home fees versus international fees as an expat parent for your daughter coming to a UK uni?
Well, we were lucky, but it was a negotiation. My daughter has English, French and Swiss passports, so we're very fortunate. We've covered all angles. So she could get in with her UK passport, but to avail of the UK fees, both my husband and I had to produce our UK passports, because not being resident in the country, they were looking more towards international fees, and obviously that's more advantageous for the university. The other aspect that you need to consider as an international going to the UK is paying rent for accommodation. They will often ask for, landlords will ask for a guarantor who has a UK address, or else international parents may need to pay the full year of rent up front, which is a huge expense.
Yeah, and did you find that you needed to have a family contact on hand anyway in the UK? I suppose maybe just even for your own peace of mind, or were you happy that your daughter was, you know, so clear? I mean, it's not that far, is it, to fly home? Or it's not that far for you to hop on a plane and fly to her? Or did you feel
not at all. Well, they say it takes a village, right? I had my sister in Scotland was the guarantor for the rent, because we needed a UK address. Right. And during COVID, of course, lockdown, my daughter came home immediately as soon as they announced lockdown, and then left her flat empty for the next 3 months before she could go back again. So luckily I could call on my brother to go around, and we sent him a key and he could go around and clear the flat, poor thing. Yeah. But yeah, it does take a village.
So it's quite a good idea, you know, if you are going to choose uni in the UK, to have family, or you know, or you know, a sort of guardian type person almost to be on hand for you, just as reassurance, isn't it? I think a lot of university work for parents are concerned. I mean, this is all about allowing your child to find their independence and start on that pathway towards leaving home. But you still, as a parent, need the reassurance, don't you, that one, you've given them as much help and the tools. It's about a toolkit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Toolkit to be fair. And peer pressure. I think peer pressure is a big thing at university, isn't it? Do you cover quite a lot of that about friendship groups and who you're friends with and where those friends come from and pressures we do you sort of cover some advice about that?
I do. I cover the social aspect of making friends because it can be quite isolating. It's very intimidating and quite overwhelming when you first start at university, especially moving in day. You know, everybody's there. Some people have got parents coming with them and they're carrying all their bags. Other people are doing it by themselves, particularly the international students, and it's quite overwhelming. So that's one of the things that we always say, and you'll see in most university websites, they say, take a door wedge, open your door, wedge it open, say hello to everybody who comes in, make friends immediately. This is your chance to make a new start. You might have been an introvert at high school. You can be an extrovert at university. You know, this is your time to sort of be who you want to be. So I say join clubs, join the activities. Don't sign up for too much because you don't want to oversubscribe when you first arrive. You do need to sort of find your way with classes and assignments and then fitting in the clubs and activities, but you do need to meet people and have that support group.
Yes. And what about mental health and well-being? Because I know particularly in the current times that we live in, and everybody getting back to focusing on in-person education rather than less online and all this stuff. Do you focus on mental health and well-being, or do you just feel that parents have that covered themselves, if you like?
No, it's huge. I mean, it's a huge topic, and I cover it somewhat in the book. Mainly things, just little basic things like taking care of themselves. Students will burn the candle at both ends. They'll go out, they'll party, introduction to alcohol, etc. They forget to sleep, or they sleep through too much and they miss classes. There's a lot of consequence. So it's very important to keep a regular routine, but also to make sure you get enough sleep. I talk about taking supplements because that feeds the brain as well, a balanced diet, that sort of thing. And the clubs and activities and just doing sport helps your mind. But there's a lot of support and obligation by universities these days as well to provide mental health support. There's counsellors, there's the student groups. So there is a big emphasis on it now in university.
And it's quite important to find who those people are and how that system works, isn't it, in your own university? I mean, it's quite similar to schools. I know, explaining boarding schools for the first time to an awful lot of parents and even their children, talking them through where is that support network? What does the tutor do? What does the house parent do? What if they're struggling, actually asking for help. I'm a big fan of the Charlie Mackesy books. I don't know if you've read the Charlie Mackesy books over there, but a lot of the theme about that is that it's a very brave thing to do, to ask for help. But
absolutely,
asking for help is quite a tricky thing to do. And I think the first step to that is, before you need help, knowing where to go when you need it. And actually that's something I think is quite important at the beginning of starting out on your school journey or your uni journey, is where is the support network? What services are available to me? What tools are there to support me? So that if you're in a moment where you need them, you know where to go. I mean, the basic thing, I suppose, is making sure you're registered with a GP, which presumably is the last thing on a young person's mind when they arrive at uni for the first time.
Absolutely. And but also taking your vaccination card, making sure you're up to date with your vaccinations. They do generally have medical centres either on campus or very close by, and it is important to do that. And I do touch on mental health in my blogs on the website, but it's also about identifying any issues. Some people might brush things off and just think, oh, I'm just tired all the time. Fatigue is not normal, or depression is not normal. And it is important to identify that you are feeling these things and that you do need to talk to somebody.
And so I suppose really all the things that we're talking about here are all about making the most of this opportunity, but having all the tools in place ahead of going, and having talked through. I mean, I know we talk to quite a lot of young people about going to university, and conversing with their parents is not often something that teenagers do an awful lot of.
No.
I mean, have you got any tips on that?
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking about our conversation, and I didn't have anything to do with my daughter's choice of university. She went through the school. They had very good UK university counsellors, or both, all university counsellors at the school, who guided them. She chose her own course. She chose the location. We talked about it a little bit, because one thing I think parents don't necessarily think about is, particularly for international students, you need some proximity to an airport or to public transport. It might be a super duper university, but if you've got to travel 4 or 5 hours on a bus, train, boat, or whatever to get home, it becomes an issue. So that's one factor that you need to take into account. But yes, having a conversation with your child is important, but that's also why I wrote the book, because I wanted to make it a one-stop shop of, here's where you go from A to Z. You've received your IB results, your A-level results, right, now what do I do? And so I don't touch on how to choose a university or what course you should take, but I literally talk about, right, here's how you get packed, here's how you get organized, here's how to open a bank account, and so on. And that's the help that parents need, I think.
Yes. And are you talking to parents in your book, in the way you write it in your resources, or are you talking to the young person with their parent supporting them with it?
It's funny. I wrote the book for students, and I wrote the book speaking to students in the book, but I actually wrote it for parents, because it's the parents that do all this work. So it's for both, but yeah, in the active voice to the student.
So when would you recommend is a good time? I mean, one of the things I've learned over 20 years now of working in education consultancy of all different ages of children is that everything's very timely, isn't it? As a parent, especially a working mum, you only have time to do certain things at any one time, and so you've got to be at the right time, otherwise it just goes whoosh over people's head. I mean, when would you think is the right time to be starting to talk to your teenager about preparing themselves for this great opportunity ahead at uni?
I would say, practically speaking, at the beginning of the summer, before IB or A-level results. The thing is, with the build-up, the last year 13, for certainly my experience for IB students, they've had their CAS, their EE, their IAs, they've had the exams. There's so much build-up, they just don't have the capacity to think about anything else. University is something that's coming up in the future, so it's just poor timing to start talking about anything else. But what I suggest always is, during the summer, give them some downtime, let them go off to the grad trip, but start being practical. Teach a few dishes, teach them how to clean, how to make their bed, how to use a vacuum cleaner, take them food shopping, give them a budget, teach them how to sort of, right, okay, buy the food for yourself for a week, here's a budget of £40, off you go. That sort of thing. Be practical. And then on the sort of academic side, as soon as they get their confirmation letter to the university, or even before that, start looking at the accommodation. What can you afford? Can you afford to have your own room with its own bathroom, or do you need to, go for the level of shared bathroom? Think about the consequences of that. That sort of thing, the practical side. And then start looking at the packing and the prep. And that's why I prepared all the packing checklists. Here's what you need for your bedroom. Here's what you need for the kitchen. Here's what you need for electronics. And it's literally laid out. And then, putting a budget aside for all these things, it's quite costly.
So, Philippa, I've probably taken up enough of your time, but so just one last question, just in sort of summary. What's the one single most thing that you've sort of learned through experience as a mum that obviously inspired you to write this book, and the website is your passion project? But what for a mum who is where you were a few years ago, where their youngsters about to go off to university, or they're in year 13 and that's ahead, what would be your single most biggest tip that you would give to parents at that stage?
I think it's more about, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, you might be able to recount stories from your university days, but you don't actually remember all the little bits and tips and tricks. And that's why I documented it all. So that's why I wanted to share this project, because for people who want to be able to help their child but don't remember all the details, this is it. This is that, like, the A to Z, one, you know, step-by-step hand-holding guide to getting your child into university and sort of taking the stress off. So I basically did the thinking so you don't have to.
Yes, and just be reassured that you've sort of been through it all, and so you're just sharing those experiences. And so, you know, I suppose my biggest tip would be to buy your book or invest in your resources on your website. So how do people do that? Where can they buy the book?
So the book can be bought online on all the major bookstores, Amazon. There's a new edition coming out right now. So on Amazon, unfortunately, it says not available, but hang in there because it will be. But it's also available Waterstones, Book Depository, Barnes and Noble, all the other major bookstores. And then our website, FromHighSchoolToUni.com. And all our, if you subscribe to member resources, you can download over 30 checklists that just literally guide you step by step on what to do.
Fantastic. It sounds to me like a resource that no passionate parent like you could do without. So, but thank you for your time. From North Yorkshire to Switzerland. It's amazing how small the world is these days. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to catch up again soon. Thanks, Philippa.
Thanks,
Take
Catherine.
care. Bye.